This happened Halloween night in 2019. I was 22 at the time, living in this apartment complex on the edge of town. Not the nicest place, but the rent was cheap and it was close to my job at the warehouse. The complex was kind of run down, honestly. Parking lot lights that barely worked, thin walls where you could hear everything your neighbors were doing, that kind of place. So, that Halloween, I didn't really have any plans. Most of my friends had moved away after college, and I was working the early morning shift the next day anyway. I figured I'd just stay in, order some food, and watch horror movies or something. Pretty lame, I know, but whatever. The thing about my apartment complex is that nobody really trick-or-treated there. It wasn't that kind of neighborhood. Most people kept to themselves, and there weren't any families with kids or anything like that. So, when I got home from work around 6 o'clock that evening, I didn't even think about buying candy or anything. I remember I ordered Chinese food and settled in on my couch. My apartment was on the second floor, Unit 2C. There was this exterior staircase that led up to a walkway connecting all the second floor units. My door faced the parking lot, which I could see through my living room window if I pulled back the curtain. Around 8:30 or so, I heard footsteps on the walkway outside. Heavy footsteps, like someone wearing boots. They stopped right outside my door. I muted the TV and just sat there listening. I wasn't really scared at first, just curious. Maybe it was my neighbor coming home or something. Then I heard the doorknob rattle. Not like someone was trying to unlock it or anything. More like someone was testing it, seeing if it was locked. The rattling stopped, then started again a few seconds later. This time, more forceful. I got up from the couch and walked quietly to the door. I looked through the peephole but couldn't see anyone. The angle was wrong, or they were standing to the side or something. The rattling stopped again. I should mention that the lock on my door was pretty flimsy. It was just the standard lock that came with the apartment, and the door itself felt hollow and cheap. I'd been meaning to get one of those security bars or a deadbolt installed, but I'd never gotten around to it. I stood there at the door for probably 2 full minutes, just listening. Nothing. No footsteps walking away, no sound at all. I figured whoever it was had left, so I went back to the couch. Maybe 5 minutes passed. I just unpaused the movie when I heard it again. This time, it was a knock. 3 solid knocks on my door. I got up again and went to the peephole. Still couldn't see anyone. I called out, "Who is it?" No answer, just silence. Then another 3 knocks, louder this time. I'm not going to lie. I was starting to feel uneasy at this point. Something about the whole situation just felt wrong. It was Halloween night, sure, but this wasn't kids playing pranks. The footsteps had been too heavy, too deliberate. I grabbed my phone and kept it in my hand, ready to call 911 if I needed to. I called out again, "Who's there?" Still nothing. I waited by the door for what felt like forever. Then I heard footsteps again, but this time they were moving away, walking down the walkway toward the stairs. I waited until I couldn't hear them anymore. Then I went to my living room window and carefully pulled back the curtain just enough to see out. The parking lot was mostly empty, like usual. A few cars here and there, including mine. The streetlights were dim and flickering like they always were. I didn't see anyone walking around. I went back to watching my movie, but I couldn't really focus on it anymore. I kept the volume low so I could hear if anyone came back. Every little sound made me jump. The upstairs neighbors walking around, a car door closing somewhere outside, the building settling. Around 10 o'clock, I got up to use the bathroom. When I came back out, I glanced at my front door and my stomach dropped. The handle was turned all the way down. like someone had tried to open it while I was in the bathroom. I know for a fact it hadn't been like that before. I always checked to make sure my door was locked, and the handle always sat in the normal horizontal position when it was locked. I walked over slowly and tested it. Still locked, thankfully. But someone had definitely tried to get in, and they'd done it quietly enough that I hadn't heard it over the bathroom fan. That's when I really started to panic. This wasn't just someone knocking on the wrong door or some stupid prank. Someone was actively trying to get into my apartment. I immediately called the police. The dispatcher asked me a bunch of questions. Had I seen anyone? Did I know who it might be? Were they still there? I didn't know. She said she'd send an officer to check it out. While I was waiting for the cops, I pushed my couch against the door. I know it sounds paranoid, but I didn't care. That cheap lock wasn't going to stop anyone who really wanted to get in. I also went around and checked all my windows. They were all locked, but most of them didn't have any kind of security features. Just basic sliding windows with those little flip locks that a child could probably break. The officer showed up maybe 20 minutes later. I heard him coming up the stairs and looked through the peephole to make sure it was actually a cop before I moved the couch and opened the door. He was this older guy, probably in his 50s. He asked me to describe what happened, and I told him everything. He took notes and said he'd walk around the complex and check things out. He also said something that made me feel even worse. Apparently, there had been a few break-ins in the area over the past month. Someone had been targeting apartments and houses where they thought people weren't home. But I was home, I said. They had to have known that. I had my lights on, and my TV was loud enough to hear. The officer just kind of shrugged. Could be they were checking to see if anyone would answer, or maybe they didn't care. That thought terrified me more than anything. The idea that someone might try to break in even knowing I was there. The officer walked around outside for a while, shining his flashlight into dark corners and checking the stairwells. He came back and said he didn't see anyone suspicious, but he'd make sure to have extra patrols in the area that night. After he left, I kept the couch against the door. I tried to sleep, but couldn't. Every sound made me think someone was trying to get in again. I ended up just sitting on my couch with the lights on, watching the parking lot through my window. Around 2 o'clock in the morning, I saw someone walking through the parking lot. He was wearing dark clothes and a hood pulled up. I couldn't see his face. He walked slowly between the cars, looking up at the buildings. When he got close to the staircase that led to my floor, he stopped and just stood there for a minute, staring up. I grabbed my phone, ready to call 911 again. The person stood there for what felt like forever, but was probably only 30 seconds or so. Then he turned and walked away, disappearing between two buildings. I didn't sleep at all that night. I just sat there watching and waiting for the sun to come up. The next morning, I went to work, exhausted and jumpy as hell. When I got home that afternoon, I immediately noticed something that made my blood run cold. There was a small scuff mark on my door right next to the lock, like someone had tried to pry it open or force something into the gap. I took pictures of it and called the police again. A different officer came out this time, a younger woman. She looked at the mark and said it definitely looked like someone had tried to force the door. She filed a report and suggested I get better locks installed as soon as possible. That same day, I went to the hardware store and bought a deadbolt and one of those security bars that wedges under the door handle. I installed them myself that evening. I also bought blackout curtains so nobody could see inside my apartment from outside. I found out a few days later from one of my neighbors that someone had actually broken into an apartment on the first floor that same Halloween night. The person who lived there had been out at a party, and when they came home around midnight, they found their door kicked in and a bunch of stuff stolen. TV, laptop, some jewelry. The police thought it was probably the same person who'd been trying my door. The theory was they'd been going around checking doors, and when mine didn't open, they moved on to find an easier target. I moved out of that apartment 2 months later. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched after that night. Every time I came home, I'd check around corners and look over my shoulder. Every sound at night made me think someone was trying to get in again. The worst part is, I never found out who it was. The person who broke into that first floor apartment was never caught. For all I know, they're still out there doing the same thing. I live in a much better place now, in a safer neighborhood with actual security. But I still think about that Halloween night sometimes. How close I probably came to something really bad happening. The police told me later that in a lot of these break-ins, if someone's home and the intruder doesn't realize it until they're already inside, things can turn violent really fast. I got lucky that my door held. That cheap, flimsy lock that I'd always complained about actually did its job that night. But here's the thing that still bothers me the most. When I was moving out and packing up my stuff, I found something weird. There was a small mark on my bedroom window frame, right where the lock was. It looked fresh, like someone had tried to pry the window open from outside. My bedroom window faced the back of the complex, where there were dumpsters and a small wooded area. It would have been easy for someone to climb up there without being seen. The mark wasn't there before Halloween. I'm sure of it. Which means that at some point that night, while I was sitting in my living room or lying awake in bed, someone was outside my bedroom window trying to get in. I never told anyone about finding that mark. Not the police, not my family, not my friends. I don't really know why. Maybe because it was over and I was leaving anyway. Maybe because I didn't want to think about how close they'd actually gotten. But I think about it sometimes. I think about how if they'd managed to get that window open, they would have been in my bedroom while I was sleeping, or while I was in the living room with my back to the hallway. I don't celebrate Halloween anymore. I keep my lights off, I don't answer the door, and I make sure every single lock in my house is secure. People think I'm paranoid or that I'm being dramatic. But they weren't there that night. They didn't hear those footsteps outside their door. They didn't see that door handle turning while they were alone in their apartment. They didn't find that mark on their window and realize how close they'd come to something they'd rather not think about. So, yeah, that's my Halloween story. No ghosts, no monsters, no supernatural stuff. Just a person trying to get into my home while I was inside. And honestly, that's scarier than any horror movie I've ever watched.